Alrighty, thank you. Technology, these companies don't like talking to each other, so it's always great trying to get these working. But no, thanks everyone for coming today. And today, very excited to talk about everything human connection and very much focused on onboarding. I guess in terms of who I am. So Chris Jones, I am the Global Director of Customer Success at Enboarder, the company who's sponsoring today. So my background, I've been with Enboarder for almost 6 years and have been in the HR tech space for about 11 years now. So seen everything ranging from recruitment processes, onboarding, and then everything employee experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess you could say. So I've worked with 500 plus companies in terms of helping them with their challenges, particularly around onboarding. But as I mentioned, also looking at the people experience and that human connection element as well. And so today, what I'm going to run you through lots of stats. So have your cameras ready if you want some photos of the stats you'll see. Looking at the importance of human connection in the onboarding experience, but then actually jumping into a little bit about the Enboarder way of thinking as well. So first half, very much stats and research, and then the second half, more jumping into how we think about it as Enboarder as well. And to kick off, what I would love to, I guess, ask the first question, when we think about the world of onboarding, human connection, it's a bit of a weird world, as we know. So I'd love just kind of a show of hands in terms of who has completely remote workforces at the moment. Is anyone? No one's completely remote. What about hybrid? Already. Anyone who are doing completely in office? Okay, interesting. If you'd be interested in commenting on why that approach was kind of taken to get back completely in the office. Okay, let's just. Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, there are some industries where, you have to kind of be in the office. It's not possible to be hybrid. Okay, so the majority hybrid, and that's what we've kind of seen in some of our research we've done as well. But what we did see though, on the right here, the research we conducted saw that 69% of respondents were actually back in the office much more often than they were at home. And there were 21% who were still in that hybrid zone, and then 10% who are completely remote as well. And it kind of represents what we saw in the room just now. I think that being 100% remote is very difficult to maintain if you weren't doing that previously, I guess you could say. So we then wanted to kind of look at some of the big challenges that have been facing us. And now I think 2020 to 2022, so much going on, so much change. It changed how we work, where we work, how we try and collaborate. And it's challenged us as leaders in the space to be able to think about how do we solve for this new way of working as well. But I think that's what's been. But now we look at 2023 and there's even more challenges because we love a challenge. And what the key findings we've seen in a lot of the research was that the first thing, almost 90% of people out there are saying they prefer hybrid work. It's the way they really want to keep doing it. It allows that flexibility and they can fit work around their life. Now, this was a study by Gallup who surveyed 700 people, and they found these results. The second one is the interesting point, and this is a US metric, but looking at the historic low unemployment rates. So in the US, it's still sitting at about 3.5%. In the UK and Europe, it's extremely low as well. And what this really shows is that the war for talent, as we like to call it, is going to get even more and more fierce as we think about moving forward. It's a weird time at the moment where we've got strange economic conditions, but extremely low unemployment rates. And we haven't really seen this before. So thinking about how you can best work to fight against that as well. The third one, the Great Reshuffle, which we've probably heard of over the last year or so, is still definitely at play. And we saw here, PwC did a study that said 1 in 5 workers say they will likely switch jobs in the next 12 months. which is kind of terrifying when we think about recruitment activities and onboarding. So thinking about how we can try and switch that for our organizations and retain as many people as we can. And then the fourth stat, and this is probably the most concerning and why a lot of this topic is about human connection and the importance of it. McKinsey found that 51% of people who've left their job in the last 6 months cited a lack of connectedness with the organization and a lack of belonging as one of the main reasons that they left their job. And so when you think about that and the importance of us as HR professionals making or putting things in place to make people feel connected, it's pretty important if we think half people that McKinsey studied said they were going to leave because of that lack of connectedness. So I'd like to kind of put a question to the room. Who feels more productive at work when they feel more connected? Just a show of hands if we... Hopefully most people. Well, it comes as no surprise that when we did our study of about 700 people, 94% of people said, I feel most productive when I feel connected at work. And there's so much research on this, and it's not just us at Enboarder. There are other people out there, some names you might recognize here. So we've got Adam, who's a best-selling author, and he basically says that disconnection is one of the main drivers of voluntary turnover. Lonely employees costing US companies up to $406 billion a year. It's interesting, that term lonely employees, just another way of referring to lack of connectedness in the organization. We've got Brené Brown as well. Connection is why we're here. It's really what drives us as human beings. And then finally, John Parsons from McKinsey is really talking about the concept of social capital is very much around building a building block that leads to that connection, which then leads to innovation, and that leads to more idea sharing. So it's not just us, it's not just me talking about why connection is important. It's a pretty hot topic right now, as you might have seen out in the big wide world. And so when we saw this, we wanted to then dig into a bit deeper and understand what connection actually is. How do you define it? Because I think if I were to ask every one of you here, you'd probably have a different answer to what connection is. So we, with a company called Red Thread Research, did some research, and we wanted to understand and put together what we call connection. And this was the definition that we came up with. So connection is relationships with people, ideas, and information that help people get work done and feel they're part of something meaningful. And so what we wanted to do was come up with this definition so that we could then say this is what we refer to when it comes to connection. So when I go through the rest of the slides here, think of this as the main part of what we call connection. And hopefully it resonates with people as well. Thinking about not just connecting with an individual, but it's also the ideas that's out there as well. So we then wanted to look at, okay, this is our definition. So then where does this connection come into play throughout the employee lifecycle? And we looked at three main areas. So the first is with the team that they're in. So we want to make sure that we have a strong connection with our team. And this is the most immediate relationship. It's who you work with each day. It's your manager, your peers. And this will ensure that, if you've got that strong connection, then people have that sense of belonging. But they also look at that extra level of trust and acceptance as well, if they have that strong connection with their team. And if we have this done well, then that's essential to being able to make sure that we have the best connections kind of forming. But it goes beyond that. You've then obviously got across teams, other people in the organization. So the second bucket that we look at is that across team connectedness, which be interesting to almost poll the room on this, how you would rate that inter-team connectedness. Even us at Enboarder, 150 employees, we struggle with that. How do we get people talking to each other? So it's a really important thing. And if you get this right, you're looking at the benefits around boosting collaboration. You're obviously getting that agility as well. And you've got that sense of community and belonging. You don't have people who are just trying to fight against each other to get their idea. If you can get those teams working together, then you're going to have better outcomes. And then the third is thinking about the connection with the organization. And this is one that is interesting if you were to, again, poll your organization. How connected do people feel? So this is that bond with the mission, the goals, the values, the purpose of the organization. And if you get this right, you're going to improve that organizational agility, you're going to improve employee engagement, and then that leads to often improved customer satisfaction, which is a really interesting correlation you can start to look at as well with that connectedness. But I think the final point here is what I find really interesting. It helps satisfy people's needs to be part of something meaningful. If you've got people who aren't connected and don't really feel there's a purpose, then you're not going to get as much out of them in the organization. And I'm sure you've all seen those who are connected and the output versus those that aren't. And it's quite different than what you see. So when we look at kind of connection in onboarding, we started to look at this concept of, first impressions matter, and they really do. There were some really interesting stats from a company called Aberdeen Group, and they were looking here that 86% of new hires decide how long they will stay at the company in the first 6 months. So that's a really interesting stat. But probably more terrifying was what they found was 1 out of 5, 20% of new hires will leave, never to return within the first 6 weeks if they don't feel connected to the organization or their team. And so, again, I go back to the manager point, hit the ground running. If we don't get that right, then they'll have to get that happening over and over and over again with a bunch of new hires. So this was really interesting. And then almost to your point there about the recruitment process, we then look at the journey of that candidate experience and where connection can work and when it can also backfire. What we can see here is you can see on the right-hand side, a typical recruitment process, high engagement, lots of resource thrown at the process, get to speak with different people. And then what often happens is once that offer is sent, then it just falls down. So the bottom line here is basically saying in a traditional onboarding, they will be left. They might receive some paperwork, but they don't really hear anything. And if you think about the experience you've had as an individual, you've gone through this great, connected, feeling empowered kind of process, and then it's just ghost town for weeks or months. And that can then impact, obviously, the organization. They're not ready. The manager's not quite ready. They forgot they actually gave the offer to this person 2 months ago. All those fun things I'm sure we've been through. And the employee feels like they're treated more like a commodity. And so the approach that we at Enboarder take is the top arrow, which is very much around connecting with them and building that connection throughout the time they accept the offer, all the way through their employee experience and their employee life cycle. And that really helps relieve any anxiety, make sure they're ready. And again, it makes them feel like they have a connection with their manager, with their team, all that kind of thing. So hopefully everyone in this room is aiming towards the top arrow. But if you're not, we can see today how we can kind of how we can get you there. And when we think about, connection itself, and we've said a few times why it's so important, other stats, and we'll look at some more of those in a second, but connection is that main fighter you have against attrition. If people feel connected, they're more likely to stay in the organization. But it's also a really great way to look at productivity. If people are more connected, they're more likely to be engaged and be productive. And then looking also at connection and commitment, if they feel connected to the organization, to their team, to their manager, they're going to be more committed to the organization and stay as well. But it also gives you a bit of a competitive advantage. If you can make sure that your team feel connected and someone else reaches out on LinkedIn trying to poach them, if they're feeling that connectedness to the organization, it's a pretty good competitive advantage that you've got as well. But it's not easy to get people feeling connected. So we wanted to look at why is enabling connection so hard? And what we found in this research was there are 5 key buckets that we can look at. We can talk about these today as well. The first is the definitional confusion, i.e., what the hell is connection? So you might go to a manager and say, hey, we need to be connected. And they say, what's that? 4 meetings a week with my team? Is that once a month? Does that mean I have to have barbecues with them? People just don't know what it means exactly. So that's one reason why enabling connection can be difficult. So what I'd recommend is coming up with a definition for yourselves and trying to make it very clear what you expect from connection. The second is the environment we're in. So as we saw, hybrid, remote, in office, just a challenge. How do you actually get people feeling connected when you've got some people on Teams, Zoom, others in the room, some in the office once a month, some every day. So it just makes it challenging. And there's no silver bullet, I'd say, but we can at least talk about that today, how we can try and overcome that challenge. Third is overwhelm and burnout. So we've probably all felt that in the room. When you're feeling exhausted and maybe resources are difficult to get at the moment, sometimes you don't want to connect with people. You just kind of want to do the job and move on. And that's a key reason why we find connection difficult in the workplace. Social division. This is, a big one. There's so much in the world at the moment. Put on the news, you've got war in Ukraine, you've got all these political issues happening all around the world, and that then bleeds into your work life. There's just no way around it. And so it's one just to consider and almost recognize, I think, in the workplace as well. Similar, the final one, the economy. We know the economy is doom and gloom, and that can often mean that resources are also limited. So maybe there were conferences or events that you might have previously done, and finance is saying, nope, not doing those this year. So it's thinking about how do you still get those connections if you don't have that physical face-to-face opportunity as well. But there is a reason why you should think about pursuing and pushing through. This was really interesting. What we found was some stats. So the top right, we'll start up there. This is based on comparing employees who didn't feel connected to their workplace to employees who felt connected. So those who felt connected to the workplace were 4.5 times more likely to say that they feel collaborative in the workplace. They were 3 times more likely to say their workplace keeps them engaged, 5.5 times more likely to say that they feel motivated to go above and beyond. The big one here is 7 times more likely to agree that their company encourages innovation. So they just feel like they're going to be more innovative if they are more connected. And the final 2, great place to work, and also think about inclusivity in the workplace as well. So this is why it's important to push through the challenges and try and get that connected workplace, because it can actually really have great benefits as well. When we think about the connection in the workplace as well, I think historically we have thought that most connection comes from the manager. Now, the manager is still very important, but what we found was actually it's the teammates that are more likely to actually help connectedness in the workplace. So thinking about team meetings, one-on-one conversations, idea sharing, all those types of things are crucial to build connection across teams, not just relying on the manager. So how can you try and empower others in the team to really try and collaborate more and build that connective tissue? And one way you can do that is obviously through this concept of the office, which is a funny concept these days, what it's actually meant for. But the key thing that respondents were saying was the reason for the office for them is going in and collaborating and not just sitting at a desk and, doing Zoom calls or doing presentations. It's actually going in for a purpose and trying to collaborate. And they want those spontaneous interactions with colleagues. So thinking about the office as a different way that we did previously is a really, really exciting thing right now. And there's some great things some companies are doing out there, transforming whole workspaces, stripping out desks, just having really great collaborative spaces. But the key things that we kind of saw for making it difficult to be connected, what we found, some of the findings here, the biggest reason people felt disconnected, different personalities or work styles, which we kind of spoke about there. Manager doesn't provide the support, so managers aren't potentially upskilled and know what to do. Lack of transparency. Simply, I choose not to get involved, which is an interesting one. Quiet quitting, that concept, which I don't enjoy that term, but it's an interesting one, right? People just saying, hey, too much to do, not going to get connected. So yeah, I saw some cameras out getting photos of these stats here. So these are the key reasons that we saw. And then the kind of the big one that I think we just alluded to there was about managers. And even though managers don't have the most impact, they have a very powerful impact in terms of where they can influence. So if we're not careful, it can kind of kill the mood and kill the connection. So there were three interesting things here. The question, this was actually two managers, and it was, I'm currently struggling to provide enough human connection for my direct reports and or team. And you've got the three different buckets: full, in office, hybrid, and fully remote. The fully remote, interestingly, were the least likely to say they didn't feel supported. So it's actually those who are in the office full time who feel least supported to be able to connect with their teams, which was just a really interesting kind of insight that we saw there. And so a big focus is obviously how do we make sure managers feel empowered and we can coach them to be able to build that connection with their teams as well. So three takeaways, and I know I'm going quite slow for time, so I might have a little bit more. Good interaction from the crowd, so we're going very well. So three key pillars, looking at how we can make sure that we're driving connection in the workplace. The first is looking at connection in general. So how do we make sure that our people are able to feel that sense of purpose with the organization as well? And then looking at how that can work at productivity, innovation, all those types of things. So connection is a really important thing, as we mentioned. Looking at also engagement. So, historically it might have been, hey, you get a t-shirt, you get a cap, and they're great things, they're nice things to have, but it needs to be a more meaningful type of connection, and it needs to be quite engaging. And so you can see here, true engagement is bred from connection ties into the purpose and mission of the organization, rather than perhaps some cool swag that we offer as well. And then the final part is around growing. And this is looking at, employees want to grow. They want to grow personally, they want to grow professionally. But one of the best ways to do that, down the bottom right here, people need people to learn and grow from. So we think about the importance of connection. If people want to grow themselves, they need to often learn from others. And so thinking about how you can connect people so they can grow themselves personally and professionally. So I just wanted to now kind of change gears, probably do this in 5 minutes or so, but looking at when we think about this theory, putting it into action, and how we see working at Enboarder. And we look at this concept of how do you bring the experience and the human connection into your organization alongside systems like HRIS or other kind of ways of working. And we kind of look at it from this perspective. So this is looking at the top is kind of the employee experience, and then the bottom is that process, systems, the data aspect of it. So for us, again, we're all about human connection. And so you can see at the top here, the way that Enboarder looks at it is you have the employee experience where you're connecting people, you're coaching people, you're able to act on feedback. So if people are saying not so great onboarding, how do you act on that quite quickly? But also looking at how do you make it quite frictionless? How do you make it personalized? So all of this is about the experience and making it like a consumer-like experience. At the same time, though, you've got the other stuff that's really important: the approvals, the contracts, the contract generation, system of record, forms, all of that really important stuff, which is crucial to any organization. And we see the kind of employee experience being just as important to that. And if your organization is more focused on the process element, I would try and challenge that and look at how the employee experience will actually add just as much value as the process element as well. And so if you look at an example of a kind of onboarding experience, right? So what's here in the orange, these are very much the process things. So it's looking at the paperwork, documents signed, compliance, training, day one, here's your new login for this system, how to access your checklist, more compliance. We love compliance training. So they're important, but then you can see in the purple, these are other examples of what we'd recommend populating throughout that onboarding experience. So it's very much around getting to know you, getting to know your team. Why don't we look at how you're feeling? Do you need anything else? Are you ready? So those kinds of things that a typical checklist might not do, we really encourage you to do when you think about your employee experience. And then it's those pulse checks. So once they've joined, don't just leave them and forget about them. It's how do you action what they're responding to? And that could be a week 1, month 3, and start to have a look over time what the managers are saying, what the new hires are saying. Is it going down? Is it going up? Which departments are doing it better? So those types of things will show you so much more than just looking, was the checklist done? I guess you could say, as you go through. And so what we look at though is, okay, why? You go to your IT team or your finance team, why is it important to put the connection? And the way that we break it down is if you have better human connections in the organization, that's going to increase the sense of belonging and engagement, which in turn helps with your retention, productivity, and growth. So this is a really nice way of linking the stuff that's more than just a checklist to actual business outcomes as well as you go through. Some stats just to kind of get the conversation going. So some of our customers, Hugo Boss, they found that when they focused on connection and using the Enboarder platform, but also kind of connection in general, they had this whopping big decrease in that 3-month attrition. And this is obviously in the retail environment where it's a little bit more rapid hiring, I guess you can say. But they also saw that decrease in absenteeism. So people felt more connected, less likely to not show up to work, which is a good thing. A company of ours in the US, they actually saw an increase in sales productivity when people felt more connected with their organization as well. And then finally, TomTom, they looked at the engagement with programs, so not even just onboarding, programs more broadly in the organization. And they saw this double of manager engagement if people felt connected at the right moments and nudged to do things rather than kind of being force-fed information in one big go. And so you can really think about this through your whole employee life cycle, right? Starting from, like we mentioned before, the candidate experience, leading all the way through to when someone leaves the organization. But each of these moments, you can create moments of connectivity and moment of human connection throughout. And today, all the Enboarder reps on your tables will be able to help with any of these. If you want to just dig deeper on any of these areas, we can dive into those. The Enboarder platform kind of runs through a few different things. So you've got the ability to build journeys. So think about timelines of an employee's life cycle, and you can actually build different experiences for different moments along that timeline. So if it's onboarding, if it's a learning journey, if it's a merger and acquisition that you're doing as an organization, all the way through to, like we saw, for offboarding. We're very big on the concept of connecting people. So you can see the concept here of people cards. Rather than just being a name on a directory, it's actually got someone doing what they love doing. So if I was to look at an employee, I would quite quickly realize it's more than just their name. They love going hiking in the great outdoors. So there's more of that human face, human connectivity to it. But obviously then, you need to focus on the insights. So when people are more connected, are we seeing business impact? So that's kind of the philosophy when it comes to Enboarder as a human connection platform. Now, I don't think I can, I just want to skip a few slides, but I don't think I can do it. So I might have to just click through them quite quickly. Just to kind of show you a few little screenshots here. One of the big philosophies that we have is very much on being frictionless. So when you think about your employee experience and employee journeys, if you're having, passwords, portals for each different system, it really hinders the ability to build connection. So the philosophy that we have is very much around being able to message through SMS, email, Teams, Workplace, anything that you use, which is capturing in the flow of work rather than trying to, make a barrier to entry. So it's an important thing, thinking of your systems and how that impacts connectivity as well. And that's kind of our philosophy there. And then the final thing, and I'll just show you, the final thing is a video, which wants to show how you can actually bring this to life and how we did it as Enboarder. The concept of getting people to connect on their personal interests and hobbies, like I said before, not just because they work in IT at company X. It's much more than that. So we look at how do we translate what people have put on their what we call profile cards, being able to then bring that to life in a real kind of networking type event. So I'll just see if this plays. For context, this was a company event that we had in Sydney, Australian company, back in January, and we wanted to see how many human connections we could make in a couple of days. So this is a quick video.
So we're getting ready to launch some pretty exciting new products that will help our customers create better human connections. And rather than just demonstrate these products at our conference, I wanted our staff to actually experience how these products enabled better human connections. So we designed a networking competition with some really nice cash prizes, and this is how it works. Every staff member built their own people card using our wizard. And this people card contains a lot of really fascinating information about that individual, including a little known or unusual fact about them. We printed those people cards and they became our conference badges. And here's how the competition worked. The front of each badge has a QR code. So you can walk up to somebody and scan their badge with the phone, and their people card will now appear on your phone. You can flip it over, and now you can read all of this quite fascinating information about the person that you're chatting to. But it does not contain their little known or unusual fact. So the only way to get that fact is to actually ask the person that you're chatting to. Once you've networked with someone, you press the button to say that you've made a connection. Our system will then generate 5 random or unusual facts. Only one of them will be the correct fact for the individual, and if you register the correct fact, you get points. If that person is from outside of your office or region, you get double points. And if you get the answer wrong, you lose points. And that was it. When we launched this at the conference, I was blown away by what happened next. Every break, every meal, every opportunity, whenever I looked around, people were just talking, they were networking, they were scanning, they were laughing, and we were building human connections. And it's really hard to describe how the atmosphere changed, but it was quite a profound change. And it just created such an incredible atmosphere of connectivity at the conference. We ended up building almost 6,000 connections in a 24-hour period, but it actually wasn't about the number. It was about the mood that we had created. It was about this sense of connection that we had created using our own products and using this fun networking game. On the last night, I was sitting next to an engineer from India, and I turned to him and said, how have you found the conference? And he sort of beamed in a big smile and he said, Brent, the conference has been incredible. And he said, what's made it a real game changer is these cards and the networking. He said, normally when I come to a conference like this, I'm pretty shy and I'm not comfortable going up and talking to strangers because I don't think they necessarily want to talk to me. But with this competition, everybody wants to talk to me, and I've got to know so many wonderful people. And that's really the power of human connections.
Hopefully it gives a little bit of inspiration for that. But, there's many ways, even if it's not in person, oops, here we go, that you can create these connections. And I think what that I love the most is, like I said, the engineer from India doesn't really talk to anyone, but felt like they could actually have a purpose to connect with others in the organization. So we're happy today to talk about any of these cool ideas and ways you might be able to think about it in your organization. But I have overshot my time slot. I will hand back across, but thanks everyone for the interaction. And if you want to know more about Enboarder in general, feel free to scan the QR code. Thank you.